We live in a time where pretty much anyone can learn and do almost anything. And we need to give ourselves permission to tap into that and be entrepreneurs and say, you know what? I might not have business experience. I might not have a business degree, but I believe in myself and I am an entrepreneur because I say so.
Welcome to the High Voltage Business Builders Podcast, a show where we interview high voltage entrepreneurs growing and scaling through e-commerce, real estate, and other wealth without Wall Street ventures, showing you the path to making your first or next million. All right, folks, welcome back to the High Voltage Business Builders Podcast. Got a cool episode today. So if you are a seller, if you're on Amazon, if you're looking at wanting to understand the difference between pricing ROI and net profit, if you want to understand the challenges of opportunity for physical products in this market space, especially if you're launching, or in some cases, more important, if you're already on the system, you're struggling, pricing, profitability, costs, marketing campaigns, everything has kind of gone up in costs. Maybe you've done well for a while, maybe you've had a little luck, maybe you're trying to figure out how to change that around. This conversation is going to be for you today, because the guest I've brought on is now an accredited author, and so I'm super excited to talk about what he's got in this book and him today. And actually, he's been a guest before, but I'm really excited to have him back so we can talk about what's going on with his book. And without further ado, Ben, welcome to the show,
It's
sir.
good to be here.
All
Thanks
official.
for having me back, Neil. Yeah, appreciate it.
Awesome. I'm trying something new today with the cameras because I found out that literally the camera that I got for the podcasting doesn't want to do 1080p recording on like any of the regular softwares. And so the guys were just like, well, just hit record on the camera and go to another camera. So if I'm weirdly looking at you and the cameras, please, for those of you who are watching YouTube, I'm not losing it. I'm okay. I'm not having mental issues. My brain is functioning properly, but I'm just trying to function two cameras now in this test process. So you get to be the first to experience that today, Ben, in all its glory. But we'll see how this works out. But Ben, for you, and I know those of you who may have not checked out his episode, go back and check it out. He's a significantly good seller. He's a great brand developer, multiple seven figures on his exit, if I'm not mistaken, and had a huge opportunity to go out and start building and brokering businesses through his relationships, and has now written a book on how he did that. And then we're going to dig into some of that today. So what is most important to you in the world of Amazon right now that somebody who's listening to this, either getting started or is selling right now, needs to know? What's most important to you?
I think there's a couple things, but really what's most important to me is encouraging people to take their e-commerce business seriously. So many people, they start it as a side hustle, which is fine because we have to, right? We can't just quit our jobs. But the problem that they have is they never get out of that side hustle mindset. And so what that does is it puts a ceiling on what the brand can achieve. So that when things start kind of happening and things do start taking off and it's going well, because they started it as a side hustle and they never really put anything in place to treat their business kind of seriously, that's when they run into problems, which we can kind of unpack today. Everything from the kind of the really boring, dry stuff to accounting and cash flow to the more exciting kind of front-facing stuff like brand and marketing.
Well, let's cover both of those because there's ultimately somebody who's listening that might just be starting or thinking about getting started. And of course, there's the people who are started and or growing or, whatever scale they're currently at. So let's talk to those people first who are just thinking about getting started. What does the world of Amazon mean today in terms of profitability, cash flow, fees, products, and kind of the business? Let's talk about the business, not the mechanics so much. You and I both know the mechanics can be operated by a 19-year-old high school dropout.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the business. In your mind, what is the answer to the business equation if you're going to start selling on Amazon now?
Well, I think that we need to answer that. I think it's important to recognize why people who are just hearing about this opportunity of e-commerce have heard that Amazon is a good place to be in the first place. And I think that all comes from the popularity that Amazon gained over the last several years as being a platform where people could relatively easily build a thriving 6, 7, even 8-figure e-commerce business. And there was so much hype. Hype's the word I'm looking for. And that has sustained. But in many cases, what hasn't happened is people haven't been educated about what has changed in the Amazon environment. Amazon remains a phenomenal opportunity to get eyeballs on your business or eyeballs on your brand, acquire customers, and start getting sales. It is no longer as easy as it used to be. Really, you could just slap stuff on there and start getting sales in the past. But it's way more pay-to-play platform now. You absolutely have
It is.
to
It's a little more complicated.
Yeah. You absolutely have to use Amazon's internal marketing platform, which is pay-per-click, Amazon PPC. You absolutely have to have phenomenally well put together listings and images. You have to understand how to write copy in a way that compels your customer avatar to buy, you really need to know everything about branding and marketing that you would expect to need to know for a direct-to-consumer e-commerce business. And you need to be able to have a handle on all of the nuances when it comes to the business side. So that's the fees for storing your products in Amazon's warehouses. We're now in Q4. The cost of storing products in Amazon's fulfillment centers has just gone up, as it does every fourth quarter now. It didn't used to do that. You have to understand the fees for Amazon to process your returns, the fees for Amazon to pick, pack, and fulfill your product, which do vary quite frequently. So many things to consider, which used to not be that big of a deal and now really are. The margins are fine, and just missing one thing out from your calculations can spell disaster.
So what you're really saying is you have to treat this like a business, which means that if you're going to get started on it, you need to think about it being a real business, not a side hustle or a hobby business. And if you don't understand a real business and this is your first time into an entrepreneurial format, you might also want to learn what it's like to be an entrepreneur, because that is going to dig into the fundamentals of the business operations, the accounting, the financing, the cash flow, the profitability, and when do revenues go to profit that can give you opportunity for scale. These are all things that are part of an entrepreneurial process, are they not?
Yeah, absolutely. And part of it is treating your business with the respect it deserves and not just as a side hustle, accepting, sure, we have to start it on the side. We can't just quit our job immediately, but we have to look at it with an attitude of, yeah, I'm starting this on the side, but I'm treating it with the respect it deserves so that it has the potential to actually get where it could go, replace my income, surpass my income, and perhaps be something I could sell for life-changing money in the future. And at the same time, by extension, it's treating ourselves with the respect that we deserve and treating ourselves like real entrepreneurs. Because we kind of grow up in this society where you go to school, you might go to university or college, you get a job, and entrepreneurs are other people. They're people with business degrees. They're inventors. They're lucky people, perhaps, who inherited a ton of money and took on the family business. They're people who knew the right people to get investment in their idea. Or maybe they're very clever designers who invented something. But that isn't true. That's just kind of what society taught us. But actually, we live in a time where pretty much anyone can learn and do almost anything. And we need to give ourselves permission to tap into that and be entrepreneurs and say, you know what? I might not have business experience. I might not have a business degree, but I believe in myself and I am an entrepreneur because I say so.
Yeah, it's really a mindset thing, isn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, you have to decide to put on the armor of entrepreneurialism and go to war, not expecting it's going to be 30 days for that life-changing opportunity, which means I think with the changes in Amazon we've seen, and even something to just happen, which you probably know about, brand registrations criteria just changed dramatically for being able to onboard products. You see that update that just came out?
Yes. Yeah.
So for those who are just going to even go and start testing, the ramifications are now you've got 2 extra steps, including ordering the product and branding the product before you could even get approved for brand registration. I mean, I get it. It's a double hoop, but at the same time, it's going to slow people down and make it more difficult for those who are thinking this is a fast process to selling, which it was 10 years ago. But now they're putting more hoops in to stop the fake sellers, the Chinese knockoffs, those who aren't really building brands and are using brand registration as a weapon in the system. So there's a battleground. People are using, they're using registrations as a way to take down other accounts through brand registration process. You can go in and register an account that's doing a false claim, and you can register against them inside of Brand Registration Central. And when that happens, they could get shut down. But even if they did nothing wrong. So Amazon is having to take more hoops to deal with those kinds of issues, and it just makes it a little slower process. So if you're listening to this, the opportunity is still there. Please make no mistake. There's an opportunity cost to that. What do you think it takes cost-wise, time, energy, attention, money, for somebody to get started today? What's the boundaries you would set for that?
I'll answer that, but briefly before I do, just on what you just said about these new hoops or barriers that are being put in front of potential e-commerce business owners with regards to Amazon's brand registry. Every time something like this happens, my initial reaction is to go, oh, another thing that we got to do. But then I say, great, more barriers to entry, which my competitors or would-be competitors won't bother jumping over.
Exactly.
And I will, and exactly. And the rewards on the other sides of that barrier, there's more for me because I can be bothered to jump over it.
There's the higher opportunity cost for higher profit of products, more process, diligence at 10 plus years in this process. Many things have changed in the 10 years we've been selling, and it's gotten more and more difficult. But as you astutely pointed out, there's opportunity on every side of difficulty.
Completely, yeah. But to come back to your question, I think you need minimum 10 grand to get started. 10 to 20 is what I typically tell people. And I often say to people that a lot of people teach using tools, Helium 10, Zonguru, etc., to go out, find products that are quite new with not too many reviews and which are selling reasonably well. And you should go order that from Alibaba and slap a label on it. I don't encourage people to do that for a few reasons. One is that, well, everyone else is going to find that product, and pretty soon that's going to be saturated and really difficult to compete on. We'll have a race to the bottom on price. The second is that I teach people to build brands around things that they're passionate about. And the chances of these tools finding something that you just happen to be passionate about are pretty small. But what I would say is that these tools still have a purpose if used correctly. So if you find something using a tool, let's say Helium 10 or Zonguru, and you find that typically the average product for that is generating X per month, let's say 10 grand per month, then I would say a decent rule of thumb is that you're going to need about 120% of that to get going. So if it's doing 10 grand a month, you're going to need at least 12K to get going. That's just a rule of thumb. I don't have any particular science behind that.
It's experience. Yeah. There's experience speaking there. Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. And my very similar philosophy, definitely 10 to 20, tell everybody the same thing. I don't argue with the passionate thing. It's slightly different philosophy because it's not my passion to have the product. It's my passion to be the business owner who provides the brand, that provides the solution that makes the customer passionate about that product and brand. And if I provide that, they're great. So I don't have to be as passionate myself about the products as much as I'm dialed into those who are passionate about the products. I need to be passionate about providing a good business and great products. Slightly, I mean, you may be saying exactly the same thing as me, and I'm obviously not being argumentative. It's just slightly philosophical. I don't need to be passionate. I love the way you ask them to consider that, no doubt about it. They'll stay in the business longer if they like the products.
Yeah.
My boundary is to be very careful they don't marry their products and don't marry the business.
it's an interesting point because my whole thing about building brands that you're passionate about in terms of the actual niche, that is kind of my thing. But as you point out, you can build a brand around something that you're not necessarily passionate about the subject matter. I don't know, you're developing a brand of scuba diving accessories and you're not interested in scuba diving. That's fine, but you are interested in the business, provided you understand enough about the niche and perhaps partner with others. They may be influencers or whoever it is to help you do that. But one of the pitfalls of my approach, which I'm fully open to this, one of the problems with my approach is that you do run the risk of getting so married to your products and you almost have blinkers on that you don't see when you need to, for example, kill a product, or you just can't see the wolves for the trees. And that's when you run into problems. Some of the things we touched on a little bit, like cash flow, for instance, or profitability, or you're so married to the way that you're doing something with one manufacturer, you can't see that actually, if only you shifted production from here to there, things would be so much better. Yeah. So there are risks, and that's why we need to always make sure that we're constantly learning from others, taking a step back, and not getting too emotionally attached.
It's very difficult to not be objective when you're in that level. That's why I caution. And there's cons to my methodology too, which are literally that people get so caught up in the idea of the numbers and the business, they forget to focus on who they're selling to. And so they get a little confused as to exactly who is the target avatar, target person, target solution buyer of their product because they get too focused on the numbers. And so again, balance is basically what we're coming up with here is there's got to be a balance between knowing the avatar, understanding the profitability of the business, and delivering a good solution and based product that with a good outcome for the customer. So they will buy more, tell their friends, and go out. And then of course, the challenge I found, and this is also a pro and a con, is that most people are not good social media marketers. They're terrible. They suck at it. They think social media is just getting on a video or post and just posting buy my product at 20% off, buy my product, get a coupon, buy my stuff. That's their idea of a social media strategy. Well, build a funnel and people will buy more of your stuff. And it's like, no, you're missing the point of a brand, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you're right. One of the things that we need to do is understand that just because we care deeply about our product doesn't mean anybody else does, or not even just the product, the brand. And simply going out there and saying, buy my stuff is not going to compel people to buy your stuff. It's only going to annoy them. So we need to deliver value and then ask them to buy our stuff. But the problem is that so many of us, as you point out, we're not social media marketers. It's difficult when we start out because when we start out, we are trying to do everything. But what I try to get people to do is learn enough that you can generally feel if somebody or an agency or perhaps or whoever is doing a good enough job, and then quickly get these things off your plate. And I learned that from one of my favorite books of all time, which is The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And in that book, the name of that book, The E-Myth, comes from this idea of the entrepreneurial myth, which is this idea that just because we're passionate about something doesn't mean we're going to be good at running a business in that topic. So coming back to that scuba diving example that I just made up there, just because somebody's passionate about scuba diving doesn't mean that they should run a brand of scuba diving equipment.
Exactly. Then you hear the old analogy, well, they could be burned out. I love scuba diving until I built a business, and now I hate scuba diving. I don't want to talk to anybody who loves scuba diving. I'm done with this, right?
Yeah, totally. But I wouldn't want that to put people off. But what I would say is, by all means, get going on it. But then you need to accept which areas you are and aren't good at and outsource them and actually, or bring people in. I heard something interesting recently from Alex Hormozy, because it's almost become cliche to say, don't work on the things that you're good at, work on your weaknesses, because those are the things you need to get better on, so you should pay more attention to them. And he actually said, no, don't do that. Double down on the things you're good at and get other people to work on your weaknesses.
That sounds more in line with my experience.
Yeah, and I pretty much agree with him. I would just say on your weak things, you do need to learn enough so that you can then have a handle on whether others are doing a good job. So coming back to
exactly my philosophy.
Yeah.
You cannot lead a team of people you don't know what they're doing. And if you're going to trust 100% that they know better than you at the moment you hire them, you're wrong. And you will find out in the process of learning that they don't know it. And then you marry them and not fire them. So remember to hire slowly and fire fast. And that hire slowly typically is because you're training yourself to learn how to do the business model first. So you know exactly who to put in and where and what output and expectation of output they should have. And if they're not accomplishing that, you move them on. That's been my philosophy that's worked very well. And it sounds like yours too, which is very cool. But it's point that you made a second ago, and I'll bring this back up because it's relevant to the book. And I think I'll say it in the same terms as you, which is quit stalling and build your brand. So of all of these things, the outcome of the book that you built is the formulation of everything you've just talked about: experience, upside potential, opportunity, barriers of opportunity. You're not going to learn it all from the very beginning. If you think you can know it all and go to 4 years of degree and then start this business as an expert, it's not going to happen, is it?
No, it's not. And again, it's borderline cliche. We hear it so much from sort of entrepreneurial influencers, if you like, to fail fast. But cliches become cliches because they're grounded in truth. I don't know if your listeners are familiar. This guy's very well known in the UK, a guy called Stephen Bartlett. He hosts a podcast called Diary of a CEO, sold his social media agency for some crazy amount of money. I was fortunate enough to see him speak recently in my city. And he said that he instructs his teams to increase their rate of failure, because that basically by default means that they're increasing their rate of experimentation. And the more they fail, the more haystacks they have, the more chance they have of finding more needles. And so I think people starting out and even people who aren't starting out, chasing perfectionism is a waste of time, and trying as many things as you can responsibly and in a calculated risk kind of fashion is the way to go. You'll fail more, but by default, you'll then find more needles in haystacks.
Execution overcomes fear, right? And learning process, which leads to continued education, and execution, which ultimately leads to knowledge. You can't just go straight to knowledge. Everybody wants to go straight to the knowledge, and there's no way around the path of execution, failure, learning, execution, failure, learning, and that begets knowledge. 100%. There's no way around it. A lot of people fear that. I hear it all the time. I'm sure you do. Well, when is this going to be successful? What if this isn't going to work? Or how are you going to help me do this? Or what happens if this happens? And it's like, well, all I'm hearing is fear.
Yeah, you're right. And at the time, when we are experiencing a tough time, it's hard because at that time, you're so in it. You're so in that difficult period that you don't take a moment typically to say, this will pass one way or another. And I will look back on this either grateful that I learned something or pleased that it all worked out fine in the end anyway. And at the time it sucks and we can't see that. But ultimately, if we don't have those experiences, we're not going to succeed, because as you say, you can't go straight to the knowledge. You have to get through the execution first. Yeah.
It's a big and difficult path. And if you're expecting that it's only going to have perfect steps, you will fail. And then you need to be able to mentally handle that. So just expect failure in the steps and process it. I remember as a kid, I had a huge poster from Wheaties, the Wheaties box, and it was Michael Jordan, and I stuck it to the back of my door, and I played basketball when I was a kid, and I absolutely loved Michael Jordan. But later on, I would learn something very powerful about his story, and it's relevant to the CEO you talked about a minute ago, because it had to do with how many shots he took. And when he was asked a long time ago how successful he was, it was because I took more shots than everybody else. He reportedly took thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of shots to get to the stat level that he was at. And he's been surpassed now by some of the younger generations who pretty much followed that, grew up in the footsteps and then went out and did it. So again, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, I believe is the phrase. Again, sort of cliche, but rooted in truth, right?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and it only becomes cliche because it gets parroted so much, and it gets parroted so much because ultimately it's true.
There's truth. What is the joke thing? There's 80% truth in every joke. So we should be telling more jokes than we'll be telling more truth. Right?
Yes.
Okay, so I got a quick quiz for you here. Last couple questions. It's going to be a test to see how well you know your own book. You ready for this?
Oh, God. Okay.
Okay. Who did you dedicate the book to?
My wife and kids. Also my parents.
Nailed it. Okay, so you did write part of the book. That's part of the criteria I'm going after here. All right, so on page 159...
Okay.
No, I won't do that to you. You'll have, if you can do that, would be amazing. There's a graph on page 160. What's the graph? Do you know?
There's several graphs.
Boy, there are several.
Okay, it could be the one where I'm indicating that sometimes you need to experiment to figure out what's going to result in the best absolute profit that you're going to get out of a product. So you actually, in that example, you're dropping the price, which results in a lower ROI, but at that lower price, you're getting more sales, so you're getting more absolute profit. Was that the graph?
Nailed it. Actually, page 151, but you're right. I read the page number wrong because I don't have my glasses on. It just tells you how old I am. Yeah, the linking principle, increasing brand affection over time, which is exactly what you talked about. Customer loyalty, fast interaction, customer engagement, the purchase, and a post-purchase interaction. Very smart. Love the graphs too, by the way. I'm not sure if you drove these or got AI.
No, I can't draw to save my life. So
you can't draw?
I came up with the ideas, and a very clever illustrator made it look pretty.
Well done, put together. I'm excited to read it. I haven't got a chance to get through it myself, folks. But here's what we're going to do to give Ben a little love today, because one book isn't just enough. One book is cool, but when you have two books is even better. So what I'm going to do for anybody who's listening to this right now, I'm going to pick a channel. You pick a channel. Instagram.
Yep.
And what hashtag?
Hashtag quit stalling.
Hashtag quit stalling on the Instagram post for this podcast of the High Voltage Business Builders. When you see it with Ben Leonard, comment quit stalling as a hashtag, and I'm going to send one of you randomly chosen a free book, a free copy of this book from me, just as a way of saying thanks to Ben and to give out something good to the people who are listening today. So on Instagram, quit stalling is the hashtag. Post it when you see this come out live, and I'm going to send one of you, and I'll message you on Instagram, a free copy of this book. And I encourage you to read it. Ben, thank you so much, dude. You're a wealth of information. You're just a cool guy, and you get a lot of crap done, man. I meet a lot of people, and I don't see how you get as much done as you do. Maybe you don't sleep. Maybe you're not. Maybe your kids are suffering. I don't know. I don't think that's the case. But you're an amazing guy, and I really appreciate you coming on and being a part of this. Thank you for the book, and for those of you who are listening, go check it out. Quit stalling is the hashtag. Go listen to more about what Ben Leonard has to say, and just get out there, quit stalling, and build your brand, right?
That's right. Thanks, Neil. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate you, brother.
If you like this episode, please share it with people you think will enjoy it as well. Thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode of High Voltage Business Builders.